concerto is everything that Bach could be if he was Handel, and everything that Bach wasn't to be if he was to be Handel. That kind of perky, happy, and extremely joyful music is not the soul of his expression. I think he excels in the expression of driven elevation, spiritual elevation. At the same time, Handel also, but less chromatic and difficult to compare other than their birth year or German background. But factually, I don't know many concerti by Bach that are like this. I know, I know. I know. Could be the fact that it's in major. Could be the fact that most of his works are in minor. Not that they have the connotation of sadness, which would be superficial and more 19th century-ish, but obviously, the elevation of St. Matthew's Passion Open doesn't need to be in minor or major. It's beyond. It's above. It's over that. It's just lifting us above ground and at the same time holding us so close to us. There is the opening of St. John's Passion is also in minor, but this with more dissonances and induced suspensions, dissonances. So there are things of luminous solar light, like the fourth partita. Perky, but not so showy. For instance, the other French overture of the second partita in both cases they are grand beyond major or minor, and the fact that the first movement here in the Italian Concerto has this kind of driven straightforwardness, no dotted rhythm, no delay, no well, syncopation, even anticipation, rather creating the delay after, it's true. And the immediate first reverence to the subdominant. 504. 501 and again 504 and a whole series of 505 and the dominant pedal. It's organ kind of pedal of the dominant. Exaggerated slightly. In any case, yes, it is a deceptive cadence, but in all the cadences since the beginning they are abruptly interrupted. As if there is a sense of almost anger perhaps in the sense not of bad mood, but of the desire to go and make a statement that has no doubt chord, the tonic, syncopation to give an impulse, and the downbeat cut off, which gives a sense of redeparture up in the middle of the bar, which sort of jump-starts us to the next. So it's extremely driven by the rest more than by the notes. The sort of compressed air that there is in that rest. And when you finish, and I think this kind of space in that rest is so loaded. It's almost like a pregnant rest. Nah, that's of course cheap. And the left hand's accompaniment. It's also 2-3-4-1 with the first 8-note rest. Like everywhere else, when I say also, in most Bach's music is 2-3-4-1, in the pattern of the pulse, organized in the details of each pattern, of each design, of each decoration. 2-3-4-1, 2-3-4-1 by 8th notes, 2-3-4-1 by 16th notes, 2-3-4-1, 2-3-4-1, 2-3-4-1, 2-3-4-1. It could have been, but it doesn't matter the speed in terms of the value 16/8 note, quarter note, because they're interchangeable in the fact that they're the same patterns of the design of the melodic decoration. It's just that they're superimposing on each other in layers that appear so vertical if you take them as slices of harmonic tectonic units. But in fact, they're all horizontal motions of melodic movement of the bass line that goes to the essential and familiar harmonic roots, and covers the display of the tonality by visiting the subdominant and the dominant, the 2/5, one above and one under the tonic. It's the sort of tonal signature of Bach. To establish his tonality, he establishes his subdominant. And that plagal tonality of Bach, the language, combined with the incessant chromaticism, suspension, and constant regeneration of the melodic and harmonic patterns on a rebounced beat, downbeat, which is not down, and an upbeat, which is the downbeat, that gives us that impulse towards the forward, almost creating a sense of perpetual motion, breathless, even so to say completely breathless, because it's just a chain reaction of continuousness, self-generating by the parts and by the elements themselves in a sort of a generic continuum that just displays in front of us like a creation of a universe that we watch happen, and that doesn't have a beginning that we can trace, nor an end that we can foresee, and therefore no coda that we should most of the time emphatically display. It is sort of like it takes us by almost surprise by the neck, and we are in the piece. It's not oh, thank God, or or no. So how much to over-ornament, how much not to over-ornament? There is many rules, there's many exemptions. As a matter of fact, there are more exemptions to the rules to prove the rule than there are rules, because obviously, and more than, from the French mordre or morder in Italian, which is to bite, the biter, is to just spice the real note, that you want to give a little more meaning to it, that appoggiatura on which you lean, appoggiare. So do you do it double, single? And how fast? Is it before the beat? On the beat. If it's on the beat, it shortens the real note. Or if it's before the beat, it melodizes itself, sort of part of the melodic note as well as decorative, which it is. But if its point is to delay because of pointing out the important note by more notes, then it should be on the beat in Baroque, as we think it should be, as well as therefore slightly lengthen the note of which it is giving the meaning of. So it becomes a nano rubato by the fact of slightly extending the value of that note which is decorated by the appoggiatura's so to say round trip between the real note, the neighboring tone, and the return, and that creates a sense of ta-da, almost three sounds, like a triplet. And then of course you can argue that because it's an appoggiatura, most of the time it means it has to lean, it has to be from the top note. So if it's single, it's grace note. If it's double, it's a mordent. And beyond this, the third or fourth turn becomes a trill. So it depends how much time you have. Or you allow to extend the beat to create a meaningful delay. But all that within the structure of the whole pulse. Obviously, you can do that, or like wigs, or very much tossed. And who's to say that the arrival note of this written out didactically by Bach notes and not just decorated by ornamental signal or symbol, it is really written out. 2/32 16th note. And we assume often that most Bach on the piano especially should be played detached to supposedly match the short, well, I don't know if it is for that reason, but to match supposedly the short length of decay of the harpsichord in comparison to the piano, which is wrong. Because if you're next to a harpsichord when you play it or you hear it, it resonates so much more than the piano. But that pianist will never accept. So anyway, I think it's the wrong reason. If you do it to imitate something that you cannot quote because it's not there. It's like saying, I'm going to foreshadow this grandfather before I saw the grandchild. I mean, come on. Enough of this. Everybody goes into this crazy comparison between harpsichord and piano. It's like not comparable. It's just a different world, different attraction towards the sound itself. Let's say a different way of even expecting the sound, or the way you connect the sounds, the jeu inégal and all these things, of course. I think we should think of it as how we feel it in terms of the tension and release produced by the instrument on which we play. The dissonances, the resolutions, the tensions, the releases, the tension release that becomes the next tension. If it's more spicy, zesty, we could staccato, who's to say, as I used to like to say. Or and ultimately it doesn't matter except the pleasure of playing it, the industry of enjoying it, this kind of jubilation of the tips of the fingers. The only instrument with organ, perhaps, where we don't touch directly the production of the sound, the vibration, the resonance, the pluck, the breath, we don't physically experience, and therefore the limitation of our physical capacity of length of bow, of intake of air, and therefore of release of pressure for the exact space that we need to produce a, let's say, halfway decent sound on a wind instrument. But in fact, we are limited, or we are organized to go beyond the limits with good technique of the sound production of those instruments connected to the body's production, the air and the touch. And here it's indirect, because between the hammer hitting the string and me pushing the key, there is a mechanism that is very indirect. I don't touch directly the string. So if I do, or the different types of touches only enhance the capacity of the imagination rather than the reaction to the sound. Is what I impulse to want to have the sound like. And of course I depend on the pedal if I overuse it, acoustic, but I cannot be responsible for the architect of the building. Nevertheless, I play with it because I have an ear that feels the feedback rather than hears sometimes, and at least an inner ear through the tips of the fingers that feels the projection of the sound I want to give, and I prepare. And this nanosecond before you play, where you sort of like sharpen your touch corresponding to the sharpening of the ear's expectation. So the awareness of the dissonance compared to the resolution, the ostinato, the staccato, the staccato ostinato suspension, the staccato ostinato suspension with perhaps a little bit of a delayed arpeggiato, and voiced, perhaps multi-touched, legato, non-legato, staccato at the same time, or just all detached, or all legato. Different ways to display it is a little bit of gardening tools, using a little this there, a little cut this here, shape that here, and then organize this there. But the plant is not what I built, it's there by Bach. I just sort of shape the plants. We're just the custodians of a garden that is given to us. In Bach, we don't raise the plants. He did very well for us. On that first beat, second, eighth note, or third beat, therefore next eighth note, it's not so obvious for a naked ear without the score in the eyes in front of it to realize that since the 4/4 can be in fact 2 times 2/4, that we always restart on the ta ya ta ta, wherever that happens to be in the score. But if you organize your hypermeter in the pulse by the direction of the line of the arrival point, you can really direct that sense of pulse pace. Well, for the listener who doesn't know and doesn't have the score, but you put the listener into sort of a drive, co-pilot seat, and you say, let me go through this path and follow me. And if you go, you have some more perhaps bumps on the road every several spots, or can enhance the syncopation. All these things are not you can this, you could do that, or you shouldn't do this, or you could do that. I think, of course, the choice is the key to it, and the to what? To the disciplined blossoming of the ideas. You shouldn't be stifled in your expressive creativity because of this or that rule, teacher regarding the rule of this and that in general. Okay, that is what you're given when you're a student. And then what you do with your musicianship that comes from inner out, and your understanding that comes from out in, that you've studied, listened, analyzed, organized. There should be a middle ground where you filter all this knowledge with your drive, and sometimes you have to do something against the waves of the expected and the allowed and the this and the that you're told, because ultimately you will be at one point eventually playing it for an audience, so you have the responsibility to carry them through the piece, or regardless if they compare you to others or judge you from the fact that you don't play like the others, or whoever the others are, in fact, the others being just this concept of otherness. It's just a question of having the crystal clear view inside yourself of how you're going to go from this point to that point, and you just go. And then everything else is the delicious, unexpected moments of life. Something all of a sudden reveals to yourself while you're playing, and you go, oh, I didn't realize that is there. For all these years, some secondary voice reveals itself and you go, oh, that was so beautiful. I never saw that. Meaning I never saw that, meaning I never saw it in light of this thematic material, or this dialogue and this. And so you can say, okay, I don't want to be here able to over-inform my audience. I'll just keep something that is my entrance into the piece that will be for myself, let's say, the rhythmicity. And this will be my credo, and I will say I go through this rhythmicity, not because Bach is pulse, or then no, Bach is suspension. Bach is, like Jaworski compared most of his gestures into a symbolism that is, for him view, religious in every sacred work, even in the non-sacred works of Bach. So you can see it in that light. You can think of it rhythmically because of the pulse that is constantly going on, to tipo 1 to tipo 1. I can see it as an architectonic organization where you go subdominant and 4 and then 5 and then 5 of 5 and then 1 and then 4 and then this and then that, and then you can imagine that more like a continuo player, and you just like, oh nice. Or just because the right hand is the decorative, manual, almost aria singer, the quality of the beauty of the designs with the throw up, the playfulness, the lightful playfulness, probably that is what it is. It's not perky, happy, major only. I think it is to do with the fact that it is extremely jovial, I would say jubilational. And so sometimes those tossed melodic lines up with the syncopation, yatata, yatata, it's sort of just like a projection of some self-contentment. And I think in that sense this is a rare piece, because I don't know that many in Bach's music that are so self-contented, jubilationally uplifting. Of course they are, but most of them are spiritually embedded in depth with a chromaticism, and not always a dark component, but not far from being there. It's this kind of solar, shining, yes, luminous music is this first movement of the Italian concerto, in that style that he was imagining was Italian, probably more Italianate than Italian, because it's after all only in North German. and then the trills. What can I say about trills? Some can, some can't, and the point is that the only way to practice it is to even the lifting of it in order to replay it inside the lifting of it, meaning of each key. So to sense the weight of balance and speed of lifting and replay while it's still halfway in order to play faster than lifting fingers, articulation, 16th notes, triplets, 30 seconds, trill. So the trill should be faster than the 30 seconds, depending of the original tempo, and the 16th notes and 8th notes. Should the trill be measured? I don't know. I think it could. Have a little bit of impulse. Ya, dee, da. But it's debatable. Because generally it's made to drip by drip, by drip, by drip, many drips. I was going to say to bridge over rather than drip. One, two, three, four, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. They both have in common, even if they're twice faster than the other and twice slower than the first, is that they both don't have a one on which to sit. They have a one on which to rebound, catapult. I know that it's a very insisting fact of mine to think of the 2, 3, 4, 1, because the natural instinct is to search for the gravity towards the magnetic necessity to connect to the downbeat. Which by itself is right. And it's actually humanly natural. 1, 2, 1, 2. The problem is that when you play the whole movement, if you do that, after at least probably, I don't know how many, 16 or many 24 bars, you would have the sense of constantly restarting, feeling like you're so grounded. When the music is so uplifting, and I'd rather go to the crest. As if I'm always pulled by my neck up to elevate myself above my condition of human, and I want to go higher to the sea, to the sky, to the heavens, of the idea of the uplifting the spirit. I become better human being while I have an ostinato low note which keeps me grounded in the mud of humanity. But I try to extract myself. Starting to Jaworski now, symbolizing every gesture of Bach. But the fact is that all this is psychological and not even musicological, at least rational. But I know that if, in a very pragmatic fact of way of doing, if everything is always aimed to give weight on the downbeat, then we become very Slavic and very grounded, which is beautiful, but in Bach's music it will sort of square it down. I'm making absolute... should be ashamed of myself. But I'm not, because I like to think that it's good sometimes to imagine how terrible it would have been if Bach's musical, melodic, harmonic, rhythmic way of holding himself through the piece was written with a downbeatish. Will be. I don't imagine it, but it's unfortunately possible to imagine. Anyway, the reason for which these examples are sometimes perhaps useful is because they put in light the reality of the beauty and therefore of the preciousness of this. Was he the only one to do that, tutti for one? No. But was he able to combine it in his own way, with the chromaticism and the melodic line and the harmonic motion in the bass? Taken apart all these tools from the toolbox ingredients, good scholars, of course, do, and convincingly so, rewrite Bach pieces or complete them, or re-improvise them, especially for the continual parts that they publish under their authority and their extensive learning knowledge of the style of that time for Bach specifically. So we can always delimit by imitation the style of Bach. What we can't really do is take the freedoms that he allows himself that we would think that he wouldn't have if we didn't know he did. And sometimes he's very good and cunning at that. He's good and cunning at that. Makes us provoked in a good sense of the word. Like, ooh, he's doing that. Couldn't believe he would do that. Would it be in a Goldberg variation with some unexpected semi-chromaticism? And you go like, oh, I think that is why it keeps on giving, because it's not just so crystal clear and sort of, well, of course it's full of complexities. That's not a novelty, and I'm just open doors by saying that. It's already factual, but there is something in his music that is so inviting and so welcoming, at the same time puzzling, and most of the time surprising, which I think is marvelous, that so many centuries after he died, we as musicians, trained and practiced and sometimes over-schooled in comparison to the short lifespan of his time people, and we still have surprises that come to us, and we still try to manage some sections that we feel like, how will I even handle it within so many centuries already of people trying to do so, and we have already so much more extensive examples to look at. It remains always a personal challenge. How will I answer to it? Does it ever end? No, perpetually restarts. had in mind in North Germany was alla Vivaldi, Scarlatti, a little bit more impetuous. Because the indication, or rather the lack of indication for the first movement of any tempo, mood or pace, mostly drives us to play the first movement moderato, so to say, in order to play presto the finale. Sorry for that. And then, of course, the middle movement, the adagio in an andante, perhaps in an andagio. And we can always argue that because the style was the flair, but Bach perhaps was trying not only formally to write a fast, slow, fast, for the Italian style of the form of the concerto without accompaniment, or providing it in the tutti sections and then acting solo in the other sections for the solo keyboard concerto. But I think that the Italianate style could be more understood if it's played so more one bar a beat, driven forward with hot Mediterranean blood, like the seasons of Vivaldi. But especially on the modern piano, the action doesn't always allow for so quick lifting of the notes in quick ornaments. And while maintaining the syncopation mood, and then having the air legato for the 16th notes, which are decorative and not more instrumental. Of course, they're all instrumental. But the difference is mostly between the decoration written out and the ornamentation, which is written by a sign. And it could be played tighter, but the 16th note should be the air legato. In any case, I try to suggest the idea that we need to play the first movement alert, rebouncing, and always ready on an ejection seat of the downbeat. And one. And not a settled downbeat, heavy downbeat. 1, 2, 1. The syncopation is the anticipation of the next beat, and that gives a sense of jump start. Of course, he uses these leaps of the sixth, and he goes through every secondary dominant of the major important degrees, 5/4, 5/5. And one could slightly delay that leap and have a little bit of aesthetic rubato, which wouldn't be so much in the accelerando or ritenuto aspect of it, more about delay an important leap of a note. Or at the end, it's not too much, because it's too straight, and even it's too affected, and if you do ritenuto, I think you belittle it, you carve the edges. It's not supposed to be that. Bach's music is at top water, it just flows, and so all of a sudden it interrupts. The emphasis about a real tenuto at the end of the phrase, or perhaps at the end of the tutti, with the beginning of the ripieno, of course the solo part, but still with the accompaniment of the orchestra. the downbeat these massive chords. Of course, in Baroque days, the notation was a stem for each note. So the chord was more like an agglomeration of individual third, fifth, and octave, rather than just a horizontal package. Almost as if it was an arpeggiated rhythmic jump start. And who's to say that we should do just because it's reminiscent of the bowing, if it would be string instruments opening. But it could be all detached, and it should be perhaps slur and detached. Or perhaps, sorry for the B flat. On the other hand, the articulation is not just a toss it this way, toss it that way. It's more about which angle of the pulse you want to bring out. Is it the jump start? Then you would do. To it, because the group of 4/16 notes in Bach are 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. Basically, not 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 4 1, because then it stalls. It's a perpetual motion when you start from the second to connect to the next first as the fourth of the four. 2 3 4 1 4 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. So this separation should be in articulation, and it's possible to have a little bit of slur for perhaps not more than 2 or 3, and then play like a calligraphy when you used to write the carves of the different letters, to obtain something aesthetically beautiful for the eyes. So legato and staccato, or legato and legato. So you do, by the articulation or choice of, implement something about the pulse and the beats. The package of phrasing, tempo, articulation, fingering, pedal, all starts with the, on the root of it is, where is the direction of my phrase? Is it, or is it? And if you choose the direction of the arrival point of each of your lines in the phrasing, then you can make a declination of what type of articulation will lead to that arrival point. In other words, it's important to always know the end of the sentence before you start speaking the sentence in the prose that it is, since it's not verse. Or perhaps it is, but not always, since the organization of the group by 4 bars is not constantly symmetrical either. So sometimes he has with the syncopations, a rhythmic syncopation, so that he hemiola over several bars. In this case, it's obviously in 4/4 there is no hemiola per se, but you have an organization where the bars and the beats don't correspond, like the beats overlap, 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1, and creates that sense of perpetual motion over the downbeats or the middle beat of 4. 1 2 3 4 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 2 3 4 1. Of course, the difficulty in that is to mention how to manage, rather than mention, your pulse, your articulation, and your pace, because you don't want to, because of the 2 3 4 1, constantly ahead of a 16th note in the group and not corresponding to the downbeat, to be rushing. That's bad. And that's heavy. That's precious, almost too much, because you start playing with the tia ta ta tia ta ta ta, too slurred, too staccato. If you insist on syncopation that is constantly on, only the left hand on the beat, then if you want to delay it, you can put little ornament, which purpose is to delay the important note. So between the ornament delaying, the decor decorating, well, or you can do that if you're a scholar, but if you're a performer, and people nowadays, of course, worship or text, you will just make yourself more enemies for details of decoration, which, by the way, are not the main notes. Sorry. So, in fact, the tempo choice, the articulation choice, the phrasing choice has to correspond to the direction of the line. If I want to do a very 8-bar, 2, 4 and 5, I can consider all this a long sentence. Or I can do by these groupments, and then it becomes like more segments connected to segments connected to segments. And then when it comes to the longer section where we have the harmonic dominant pedal, notes go 2, 3, 4, 2, 2 also meaning, and the 16th notes 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 in faster speed. Mamma mia, mamma mia. The design of it is always to rebounce and not to establish the downbeat. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2. In 8th notes, what you do here is 16th note, which is the denial of the downbeat. I insist very much on that, yeah. The downbeat is the beat that launches you towards the 3 next beats, which will be 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And even in the series of 4 bars, there is still at some point a downbeat. At the very end of a long phrase of 16 bars or so. F major, so luminous, such a choice of tonality for our perfect pitch days possible because of the fixed tuning of 440 for most of the pianos, all the pianos really, which wasn't of course the case in harpsichord days where you could hear it, the equivalent of so who's to say that the real choice of F major is the one for the color of the tonality, the one for the mood? Of course, we cannot think of it in another key than what it is when we play a masterpiece, which anyway exists before us. And we cannot say, oh, I wish it was not like, what about the Appassionata in F sharp? It's a tortured key to our psyche of the Romantic era more. And then F minor. But what if it was a C minor? With these arpeggios, it's almost like Mozart's violin piano sonata. In E minor. Are the similarities between pieces are intriguing, but the tonalities sort of define them for us today more because of the pitch that is defined. So we would have the F major concerto, the Italian by Bach, in F major. And if you hear, we sense something more tense, or just moving half step up or down creates a sense of relaxed sound or tense sound, or A flat. I think it's to do also with the modes. If it was that is more debatable, obviously, since the choice of the more minor or clearly major modes, since the minor modes can be half major, half minor, bottom minor, top major, which gives a different hint to the atmosphere, the mood. Obviously the F major, the first movement, gives the D minor relative minor for the second movement. So had it been in minor, and then the slow movement would be in the relative major. And then the finale. And you know what? It would have sounded good too, and nobody would have said, oh my god, it's terrible, it's not in major. Because I think if the principal key is minor or major in Baroque, it had less incidence on the psychological intention of the music, since it was more pure music. But the choice of the tonality was obviously a choice of the composer in absolute terms, since all of the harpsichords were not tuned the same way, let less the organs. But Bach made it a point to write pretty fugues for different keys for the organ, even if the different organs were tuned sometimes to a third of a difference between churches where he would play or improvise or compose. Of course, for singing is a difficult thing because the high notes cannot be higher, but for instrumental usages, why not? And so, of course, we are used to hear certain pieces in their own key because they're sort of like bathing in their own sauce. Nobody could think Beethoven's symphony in B-flat minor. It's even more dark, in my opinion, than even if it's the same rapport of intervals. But then sometimes we have this idea that the notes correspond to the mood. And when we start the D minor, with very few accidentals, just the C sharp for the leading tone and the B flat for the 6th degree, without which will be half major, and the top tetrachord. If he had used the melodic ascending, but he uses the harmonic, as if to mean more minor, fully minor, and not like Beethoven's second movement, second theme, first sonata. Half A flat major, half A flat minor. In fact, those subtle half major, half minor modes, most within the minor mode, of course, different declinations of it. It brings us to play with a more subtle rapport of the meaning of the text. And in the Romantic era, of course, we treat the minor for sadness and major for happiness, but that is perhaps also a cliché. And when you have in the concerto the hitting of the diminished seventh, checking after all these triads, different inversions, dominant sevenths, and then like when you start 109 by Beethoven, also these triads, the dominant seventh, and then the usage of the diminished seventh, that is a Sturm und Drang moment. And here, 5 of 1, 5 of 4, diminished seventh is to the dominant 5, 5 of 5, 7 of 5. So we establish a tonic by the dominant. Deceptive. To do what? To delay the tonic. And the fastinato on fa, 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 ostinato. Appoggiaturas, 2 by 2 in the very short phrasing of the bowing, tam 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 tam. Had they been not repeated, would be syncopations, which will be in fact suspensions. Between the decoration played so fast in this, of course, very Italianate fast tempo I took, the decoration, written notes, becomes to the ear of the listener a mordant almost, or a passing tone, in other words, an ornament. Tetrachords. I like to practice major scales with the tetrachords of the bottom of the next becoming the top. And here, so I think Bach must have amused himself quite a lot to do this kind of quick change of tetrachords in a circle of fifths modulation.